This video will have minimum editing because I don't think it'll get many views, and I don't feel like inserting that much work into a video that I'm basically doing for free. Anyway, I am a Final Fantasy VII purist. Now, there are some people on YouTube who use YouTube who think that YouTubers or a person who makes a video can influence their own opinion or something like that. So if you are someone who loves Final Fantasy VII a lot, just take this video with a grain of salt or just stop watching the video in general. Anyway, I'm a Final Fantasy VII purist. I think that all these other Final Fantasy VII spin offs and prequels and sequels are all unnecessary. It would be like adding more lore to the comic Watchmen, except they already did that, and the added lore sucks. And I feel that way about Final Fantasy VII. Now, I understand why Square Enix did to Final Fantasy VII with what they did, adding all these prequels, sequels, and spin-offs because it's very profitable. Final Fantasy VII is one of the most profitable JRPGs in history. Square Enix pretty much hit the gold goose jackpot, but I do have some issues. First of all, what they did with Aerith. Now, this is actually something that the remake did better, was that it did keep Aerith's mischievous personality intact. In Kingdom Hearts, they made Aerith all monotone, and it sounds like she was on some sort of medication that made her a lot more calm or high or something. No, the original Aerith or Aerith, she was a lot more mischievous because she was a girl that grew up in the ghetto basically, so that impacted her personality. Another thing I don't like is with Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, where they expanded on Zack's lore. Now that could have been interesting, but and as someone who played Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core as a kid and liked it as a kid, as an adult, I couldn't stand that game. Like Final Fantasy VII's Crisis Core is so weird. Like we got Zack, and he's partners with Angeal, and then Angeal's evil, then he's good, and then he's evil again, then he's good. Oh wait, Angeal actually had a point the entire time, and I just don't care about Crisis Core's story. Crisis Core's story is basically FF7 but worse. I mean, we got the same mad scientist character, and we also got Genesis, who is basically a gayer, lamer version of Sephiroth. Ugh. We got a Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core remake, which is awesome. I'm glad it's not on the PSP anymore, but they made Zack's voice worse. But my biggest problem with Crisis Core is how it made Zack's death a lot more glamorous and spectacular. That's a hard word to pronounce. In the original game, when Zack died, it was very anticlimactic and it was a lot more tragic and a lot more realistic. Now I know it's a Final Fantasy, keyword fantasy, so it's not always going to be realistic, but his original death at the handful of a few soldiers is just way more realistic and believable. Here in Crisis Core, they make Zack go out like freaking Jesus Christ, like he kills like 1,000 soldiers, and I'm like, doesn't really make much sense because if Zack had the powers of a god and killed all those Shinra soldiers, then how did he die then? Like, you might as well just keep him alive at that point. Yeah, he was weakened, but come on, if you grind enough in Crisis Core, you can pretty much one hit kill every enemy and boss. But yeah, I don't consider Crisis Core canon. And then there are the Final Fantasy VII remakes. Oh man, I'm mixed on those. I haven't bought them. I've only seen clips of them on YouTube. And here's the thing: I refuse to buy the Final Fantasy VII remakes because it's an incomplete story. I mean, Final Fantasy VII remake came out in 2020. It's the year 2026. There's already been a whole console generation, and the story is still unfinished. I mean, Part 3 is coming out sometime in the future, but I don't see the purpose of buying FF7 Remake and Rebirth or whatever it's called if it's not even the complete story. Now, the logic is the argument that people use as to why this game's story, the remake story, split into parts is because Final Fantasy VII has such a large world and so much lore. And I'm like, hell no. Have you played the original Final Fantasy VII? It's not that big, guys. I've seen bigger video games and JRPGs like Xenoblade Chronicles, and that's a full game. Xenoblade Chronicles, that's a game where you play as basically tiny humans who explore a dead body, and you explore the dead body of a giant basically, and the game is so big that the giant's dead body can like create life and stuff. You know, Final Fantasy VII, the original game, it has some towns and cities, but it's not that big. I don't even think it's the biggest Final Fantasy on the scale wise. They could have easily remade Final Fantasy VII into one part and just, you know, not split it into parts. Now, the reason they actually did this was so they could try to profit and make more money, which ironically, it hasn't really worked because, as from what I've seen on Google, the sales for the Final Fantasy VII remakes, they're fine, I guess, but I mean, they haven't sold as well as Final Fantasy VIII. Even Final Fantasy IX has been more financially successful. Another argument that Final Fantasy VII remake lovers love to claim is that, oh, well, the original game was split into three discs. Yeah, three discs that came out on day one, and it was only split into three discs because the PS1 wasn't that powerful to handle all that kind of game. We live in an era with the PS5 that can handle huge games like Red Dead Redemption 2, or I don't know. I don't really play that many open world games, but I'm pretty sure a Final Fantasy VII remake could handle everything in it. But yeah, from what I've seen, it's just more spectacle than actual quality. Like, wow, the Final Fantasy VII remakes have better graphics. I don't really care though. Not to mention that the gameplay, from what I've seen on clips, it looks so clunky and complicated. Like there's just menu screens all over the place. Now the original game had more was turn-based combat via ATB, but the menu was a lot more simplified. Here in Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth, the game it's like the game can't make up its mind. Does it want to be like Devil May Cry, or does it want to be like a traditional Final Fantasy? And here's the thing: Final Fantasy needs to go back to being turn-based combat or ATB, not whatever hybrid weird thing that we've been getting since Final Fantasy 13. Now, the common argument against this is that, oh well, we can't have Final Fantasy be turn-based combat. Turn-based combat is outdated, and it wouldn't sell well. Well, that claim is bullshit. Expedition 33 that sold well. Persona 5 that sold well. Persona 3 Reload that sold well. I'm pretty sure Persona 4 Remake is going to sell like hotcakes. Baldur's Gate 3, Dragon Quest 11, that game sold way more than any of the Final Fantasy remakes, and that's from Square Enix. Like, just bring back classic turn-based combat. You know, I like controlling more than one character. I mean, hell, even when the Yakuza went turn-based, the turn-based Yakuza games actually outsold the original beat 'em up games. The argument that turn-based combat is outdated is just stupid. Turn-based combat is awesome. It lets you control more than one character, and each individual character has their own strengths and weaknesses. Like I like action games, don't get me wrong, but people who try to downplay turn-based combat by calling it outdated, they just sound stupid. Well, anyway, I just pretend that all these Final Fantasy VII remake spin-offs or whatever, they didn't happen. For me, the only canon game is the original Final Fantasy VII on PS1 and its remastered versions or PC ports or whatever. My only issue with Final Fantasy VII, the original version, is that the translation is pretty rough. Like, it's not confusing, but there are some, spelling and grammar issues and all that kind of stuff. And, yeah, that's all I gotta say.